Yeah, g'day YouTubers. Spannerman again here with another video. Today we're going to talk about the different angles between an Oregon type style grinder and a Stihl USG grinder. The difference is the reference point that Stihl uses and the reference point that Oregon uses. So the reference point that they used to tilt the head or the top plate cutting angle is the correct terminology. So let's just get that out of the way. This is the top plate angle. This is the top plate cutting angle. The top plate angle here is set by this scale here from 0 to 35 each side. And the top plate cutting angle, which is the angle that the grinding wheel comes on the beveled face, is set by this movable grinding wheel head. Now, Stihl uses 0 degrees vertical reference point at 12 o'clock. So 0 degrees is up the top here. It's 0 degrees at 12 o'clock. And on the Oregon, they're using 90 degrees at the 12 o'clock position. Don't know why. Well, the only thing that I can realize, the only thing that I can say why they're using 90 degrees as their reference point is because going back many years ago, most people used a protractor and 90 degrees was always in the middle and they went to the left and the right with the different degrees. So I would say that was the reason why they did that, because it was quite common to use 90 degrees as a reference point and also use 0 degrees as a reference point, as what they've done down the bottom here, using 0 degrees as a reference point. So that's one way that you can be confused, because when you actually, they turn around and say that this angle here is a 30-degree angle, but in actual fact, if you put the protractor on there like that, it's a 60-degree angle. So why do they say 30-degree angle? What's the reason? If the actual tooth is 60-degree angle, why would you say it's 30 degrees? Well, what you've got to realise is that you've got to go back before angle grinders were invented, or chainsaw grinders, I should say, were invented. So what they used to do back in the day when they had files to sharpen up your chainsaw before the grinders come along, they would tell you to hold the file. So if your chainsaw bar was running this way, they would tell you to hold the file perpendicular, which is 90 degrees, move at 30 degrees and proceed to file. So that was your 30-degree filing angle. And you can actually see that on a USG chart. Still have got one. I'll just try and bring that up. Yeah, you can see that. If you look closely, you'll see where it's got that 10-degree angle there. So that 10-degree angle is referred to as the filing angle. And as I said before, it's the filing angle. So we'll grab the tooth. If we hold a file against the point, it's the angle inside that we're measuring. So it's the angle between, I'll see whether I can actually hold this. A little bit difficult, but we'll give it a go. One hand, very difficult, people. I don't think I can do it. We'll try and do it this way. Yeah, that'll work. Okay, so when we talked about the 30-degree file angle, we're talking about this angle that's in between here, between the file and the face, this face here. That's 30 degrees. So it's referred to as a filing angle. And as I said, it comes back from the day where you'd hold the file perpendicular to the chainsaw bar and you would move 30 degrees. So that's where that comes from, and that's fine. That's pretty easy to understand. So you've got your 0 degrees here and you just move into the position, which at 30 degrees is probably the most common that you're going to use. It's the best all-rounder. Look, people have played around with these angles for years and years and years. And for your standard like firewood, 30 degrees is fine. In softer wood, you can go in softer wood, you can go 35 degrees. And in harder wood, you can go 25 degrees. So 30 degrees is your general all-round cutting angle, because if you do go 35 degrees on a full chisel, this point, it becomes more pointy as you go 35 degrees. And the more aggressive you go on that angle generally means that it'll get blunter quicker. So that's the trade-off. You go more aggressive angle, it'll cut faster, but it will blunt quicker. And that's why 30 degrees for the top plate angle works out really well. The top plate cutting angle, which is the angle of this wheel, the grinding wheel here, which on this grinder is set at 60 degrees. You can set it at 55 degrees or 50 degrees. If you set it at 50 degrees, it leans over a little bit more, so it's a little bit more aggressive. And again, the more aggressive you go, the quicker it blunts. So typical 60 degrees is your best all-rounder. Okay, so that's the Oregon. Now, I've seen it on some of the channels where people say that they've brought a Stihl USG grinder because they had a Oregon Type 1 and the angles are all different and they're confused, and they even had people turn around and say, oh, I got 60 degrees on my top plate cutting angle, which is this angle here that comes down, top plate cutting angle, not to be confused with top plate. And they say this is 60 degrees, but the Stihl USG grinder only goes to 50 degrees. So they're thinking, and likely so, and most people probably would say, well, why is the Stihl different? The Stihl really isn't any different. The only thing that Stihl did was don't use 90 degrees as their reference, vertical reference point at 12 o'clock. They used 0 degrees as their vertical reference at 12 o'clock, which is what I actually prefer. Because if you were to say tilt the head, and the head's actually tilted at the moment to 30 degrees, I believe that's 30 degrees. Yes, it's 30 degrees. So therefore, if you tilt a Stihl 30, 35, 40 degrees, that's exactly what it is at. You're not taking a reference point from 90 degrees because the angles are different between 0 degrees reference point and 90 degrees reference point. So I actually wrote them down here. So on the left side, you can see Stihl angles here, 0 reference used, 45 all the way down to 0. And on the other side, corresponding, we've got Oregon grinder angles, 90 degrees reference point all the way down there. So it is different. And if we look at the most common ones on an Oregon type grinder, which is 60 degrees here, that corresponds to 30 degrees over here. So Stihl recommend 40 degrees, that corresponds to 50 degrees over here. So the most common in the Oregon would be 60, 55 and 50, and that translates over to Stihl. From 60 would be 30 degrees, from 55 on the Oregon would be 35 degrees on the Stihl, from 50 degrees on the Oregon would be 40 degrees on the Stihl. So that's the difference. And look, if you don't know about that and you go out and buy a Stihl grinder, then you could be confused. And that's actually what happens. Quite a lot of people do get confused between the Stihl grinder and the Oregon grinder. But the actual top plate is exactly identical, using 0 degrees as reference point. So this is quite standard. You could have equally had 90 degrees on here, and then you would have moved it to 60 degrees left and right, which is exactly what the tooth angle is. But remember, as I said before, it's not a tooth angle we're referring to. We're referring to a file angle, which traditionally goes back before grinders were invented. So I hope that addresses the difference between Oregon type grinders and Stihl. The only thing that's a little bit different on the Stihl grinder, because Stihl USG stands for Universal Sharpening Grinder. It does circular blades, tungsten carbide round blades. It also does large hedge trimmer blades. You've got to change this mechanism here. And it actually has a scale on the side, which is a little bit different. Let's see if we can get some light there. A little bit, we'll see if we can get a bit closer. You might be able to read it. But the actual scale, a little bit difficult. It goes from -40 up to +40. We'll see whether you can see that. There it is there, +40. So that's the scale on there. The actual scale is in millimeters. It's not in, like they turn around and say 10 degrees. So obviously Stihl don't recommend the 10 degrees downward tilt. Going back to the days of the MS660, probably around 1990, it was in the Stihl manual that 10 degrees downward tilt was recommended, but I think they've slightly changed the height of the tooth, of the geometry since 33 years ago. Still don't recommend it, but I still recommend using a 10 degrees downward tilt, or even if it's a 5 degrees downward tilt. If you look at the side of the tooth, and we've got what you want to avoid is having a bit of a large hook. If you've got a bit of a hook on a full chisel, this only refers to full chisel chain. So if you have too much of a hook here, this hook is easily gets blunt quicker, and on real hardwood can even get damaged and bend over slightly. You mightn't be able to see it with your eyes, but if it's only 1 or 2 degrees, you may not see that with your eyes. And then that is the reason I use a 10 degrees downward tilt. But it depends on the timber you're using, and it depends on whether you're hand filing. It just depends. Some people, and also depends if you're using a hand file, make sure you're using the right file, because if you use a file a little bit too smaller than what you should be using, you'll definitely get some hook. And if you get some hook in that situation, you'll find out that it's much more susceptible to getting damaged, and if it's too pointy, it can get blunt much quicker. So yeah, try to avoid too much hook on a full chisel. You've got no problem on a semi chisel. You don't have that problem. It's only full chisel. Look, I hope that addresses the situation, because I've done a little bit of describe this in a previous video, but not into great detail, because even on some of the forums, it was funny that a guy brought a second-hand Stihl USG grinder and said, look, am I doing something wrong? I don't understand how to use the head angle or the top plate cutting angle is 60 degrees. On my Oregon one, the Stihl only goes to 50 degrees. So what do I do? So he didn't understand that. And rightly so, that could happen to anyone, that going from one grinder to another grinder. And the other thing, they say, oh, I'm really not used to the Stihl because the motor tilts on the opposite side. So look, I love the Stihl grinder. It is a precision, high quality grinder. I've still got the Oregon type grinder. I've got a Tecumseh. That's a fairly high quality grinder as well. I like both of the machines. Probably I prefer the Stihl because it's a little bit more precision. The other thing is you've got these bolts on the side, on both sides here where the head comes down. They're like a eye socket bolt. They're not a pin that runs through. On all the Oregon type grinders and all the other grinders out there, they just have a pin that runs through, and there's always a bit of movement in that system, whereas where you use the eye socket bolt system, there's no movement and it works much better. Look, thanks for watching. Give us a thumbs up. I hope that introduction into the angles between the Stihl USG and the Oregon all makes sense. If something doesn't make sense to you, please put something in the comments and we'll get back to you. Thanks for watching, and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.